Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yeah.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
No.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, you want to start with that?
Here we go. Exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing it the exact same way? Let's start with the smoky bar.
No. It's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
Here we go. All right, we should be live. So welcome, everyone. Hey, Dustin. Good to have you on here, as always. I'm Jeff, and we are joined tonight by Christophor. That's with an O. I misspelled it, apparently, so I'm going to go fix that here in a second. And welcome to the show. We're going to be talking about your product line for DCC, and it's pretty cool because it's going to be about pirates, from what I understand. So the salty
There
funnel.
are some pirates, that's right.
So welcome to the show. Thank you very much for coming, and hello everyone in the chat there. Welcome. It's good to see you too. So welcome, gents, and we're going to kind of tee it up with our usual early bird questions we like to kind of get into, just kind of ease it in, make sure the chat knows who you are. So typically our first question is, how did you get into gaming, and what was that first gaming group like?
It was around 1979 or 80. I made a friend, I think it was like 3rd grade, made a friend in 3rd grade who invited me over to his house after school one day, and he totally changed the whole course of my life, because he not only introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons then, they had an Atari home console, they had a really old home PC. His mom would play Load Runner and like write with marker like where she had to do certain things and stuff. They had HBO. I had never even knew what it was. Came over the air. Pirates would break into it every once in a while. You'd be watching and something totally crazy would go on. And so he got the books, and the first I think one of the first box sets, whatever was available in 79 or 80, and we just started from that, and then we went to Gamma World and Star Frontiers and Boot Hill and Call of Cthulhu and BattleTech and everything. I tried to like add up all the games I played. Every time something new comes out, I'm like, that looks fun, let's play that. And so the first gaming group was him DMing and me playing. He would play a character as well, and
That's interesting.
Didn't really grow beyond that for a long time. We'd start making up our own things, like we'd build model tanks and airplanes, and then we'd get out long tape measures, and we'd be like, okay, you can fire this far, and you do this many D6 and stuff like that. And we would just throw a bunch of crap on the floor and then put a blanket down and be like, there's the terrain.
Classic, right?
Yeah. Who hasn't done that?
Absolutely. Coke cans and bottled water. That's what we had.
Right. That's right.
That's pretty cool, though. So it was just the two of you guys?
Yeah, just the two of us.
That's wild. I don't think we've done that one where it's a player and a DM at the same time. That's interesting.
You don't see that too much, but it sounded almost like you started out almost more with like a wargaming, like with the minis and models, and like
that was after D&D. First it was D&D, and then we were like, well, that's fun. Let's start doing this. We played Traveler, which is still around. That game was always awesome and fun. And Space Opera and Car Wars. And we got lucky, and there was a hobby shop. He lived right by my grandmother's house where the school was. And there was a hobby shop that was like in between And so when I would be on the way to his house, we would just meet at the hobby shop and buy, so many lead-based miniatures and stuff that how we had money at that age. I don't know.
Small miracles, right?
Yeah.
Man, that was always the question. Like, you just get lucky enough to have like, $5 to get something. It was like the biggest event of your day,
Yeah. Steve Jackson really kept us in games with those. They had those little plastic paper cases, and that was the whole game, like Car Wars and Illuminati and stuff.
Oh, that's right, man. I forgot about those. Yeah, Car Wars was fun. And
they were cheap, relatively. And then he took me to Gen Con. I believe it was Gen Con 12.
Man.
When it was still at UW Parkside in Kenosha. I'm up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yep.
And I was coming out of the bathroom, and I came around a corner, and I bounced off somebody's stomach because I wasn't paying attention. And I looked up, and I'm like, oh my God, you're Gary Gygax.
Ha! Wow. Seriously. Well,
and he was like, it's all right. It's cool. I was just like, what?
Man, that's crazy.
Like 12-year-old me, 13-year-old me or something. I was like, whoa, man.
You don't get much closer than that.
No.
Well, that's something else, man. Yeah, it's been a long time since it's been up there too. Like I remember some of those events were really cool because they had there was like a spy bar that was nearby, wasn't there? That
is called the Safe House.
The Safe House, yeah.
Yeah, I used to live right next to it, and so I had a card, a very important operative card that would get me in for free all the time.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. But yeah, I've been to everywhere Gen Con has been. I've been, except for I think the first couple, 3 or 4, before it went to Parkside.
Mm-hmm. Man.
So I used to live downtown, and when Gen Con came, all my friends would crash on my floor.
Yeah, it's become us over here now. We're in Indianapolis, so we're just a hop and skip from the current location. It's a good time. That's a huge con. It's just like everybody's there.
Really grown exponentially over the years. 75,000 or something people now.
I went a few years back, and it was the first year that they had taken over Lucas Oil along with the convention center. And I walked over there, and it was just like, I didn't think the Gen Con could get any bigger than it was. And I walked in there, and I was like, holy cow. Like,
last year I had 2 games in there, and that's the worst slog. It's like 85 degrees out in your log. Yeah. You have to walk from the nice air conditioning, and then you're outside in death tunnel.
Yep.
You don't step off that curb, you get killed practically. And
there is an underground pass if you know how to get to it. But
I found that. But yeah, if you're outside, you're just like, oh,
it gets muggy sometimes for sure. Midwest is the humidity, it's
trying to hide behind the post at the taco trucks and stuff, and you're just like trying to eat, not melt at the same time.
Oh man, yeah. So you were talking about like BattleTech too. That's a game we haven't played in a long time. I had like all the books. I never got to play it. So it was like just stacks and stacks of like cool artwork, cool systems, and I would sit around just making the mechs. Like, oh, it's gonna be sweet. One of these days, I'm gonna get to play. Never happened.
That same friend, Greg Lukomsky, who introduced me to D&D, he and I ended up freshman year at high school together too. We were in the Literary Graphics Society, which meant we read comic books, and we were in the I can't remember what the role-playing game club was named. But that's all we did after school is we read comic books, like the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and we played BattleTech, and we got like 2 teachers to come play BattleTech with us as well, and they were like, what is this? And I'm like, you don't even know. This is the beginning for you.
Oh, that's sweet. So how long did it take you guys till you had like a full table of players?
That's a good question. High school, probably that freshman year of high school, which would be 85. That was the first time where we had, 6 people at a table. But up until then, it was like me and him and 1 or 2 other friends. Not a lot of the other kids were interested in it at the time. We were literally like the Strangers Things kids sitting down in somebody's basement, technically in his parents' attic. And just playing whatever game we could get our grubby little hands on. And then that first time we went to Gen Con, we got playtest credits because somebody had a game, and we were like, "Man, that sounds really cool!" And it was like a in between D&D and like Lord of the Rings. This was like right when Iron Crown was bringing out their Middle Earth role playing system. And so we played a couple games, and our names have been in those books since, I don't know, 81 or 2 or whatever. I lose track of the years.
Yeah, they go by pretty quickly after a certain point.
Yeah,
sure. Oh man. So with these sorts of games, with the wargaming in particular, there's obviously it's a lot of strategy and kind of like the nuts and bolts of a game. Is that kind of like where you live in gaming, or are you kind of across the board in terms of like more narrative style, more role playing heavy? Like,
I've been the DM for most of it. Every once in a while, I get some respite and I get to be a player, which is why I totally hooked up with Defenders of Cobalt, so I didn't have to run any games anymore.
Chuck has always wanted to run something.
Chuck.
So.
But I like to tell a story, and then I try to make sure that the 3 pillars are always there. There's always going to have to be some type of combat, or an option to have combat is what I prefer. Even like in this adventure and some other stuff that I've written, I call it a pivot point, which is basically what do you do? And some DMs have problems like preparing or coming up with the 6 different things that a party might do. And so the pivot point is I narrow it down to like yes, no, not interested, WTF, and then it's like, yes, we'll do exactly what the story thinks we're going to do or wants us to do. No, we're totally not going to do that. Not interested. They just kind of veer off onto some side quest, and WTF is like, kill everyone and burn the village down. And I'm like, okay, be prepared for this, because one of those will probably happen.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Dustin and I are working on games right now. I'm sure he's about to tell you about it.
Well, I was going to ask you mentioned having 3 pillars, and I think I know what the 3 are, but for people who are unfamiliar with that terminology, why don't you explain what the 3 pillars are for a game?
Sure. In a role-playing game, there's role-playing, so there's social interaction, so that's pillar 1. And to keep from railroading as much as possible, you have to have pillar number 2, which is exploration. Give everyone a sense of agency, so you let them be their characters, you let them control their characters out in the world. And then the 3rd pillar is combat, because drama ensues when there's violence in the game sometimes. You can have drama without violence, but most players come to swing a sword at something every once in a while. So I try to make sure that in the middle of the story, there is an opportunity for it. It might not happen, but that's up to the players then to decide, or, And
most TTRPGs, and this is not a bad thing, the book is 80% combat oriented stuff. Most TTRPGs are. It's very rare to find one that's not. So
3 or 4 chapters of this is how combat works, and like, oh, by the way, here's your background for your character.
You're lucky if you get half a chapter on background when you're. But 3/4 of the book will be spells and combat abilities. And,
So
I mean, it's fair to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true when you need to. The combat's one of those places where you need to have things fleshed out, right? So like, you can kind of get away with just kind of narrating or talking to people or doing your social thing above the table, but you generally don't need rules for that. Though we are playing some games where there are mechanics now that are kind of governing those things as well. But combat is one of those, like, I don't think any player is really comfortable when there's no rules for combat. It's just like, just what happens,
Yeah, sometimes the dice are not conducive to the combat because Roll20 seems to be notorious for screwing us every time we try to do something.
They experienced that in the game yesterday too. So.
Yeah, couldn't roll to save my life.
but that's what I like about DCC is if you're close, the judge can just be like, "Are you satisfied with that dice roll?" And you're like, "No, I burned 2 luck."
The luck mechanic for DCC is an interesting one. I've only ever seen another system that uses something like it, and that was Cyberpunk. Has a very similar, so where you can buy up to the difficulty if you need to, and it is a limited resource still. But you do have that option. So
Yeah, I really like the fleeting luck as mechanic that they brought in as well with Lankmar, where everyone starts out with 1 point, and whenever a player rolls a 20, that player gets another point. But if any player rolls a 1, all the luck is gone.
Oh, interesting.
You can use that to like do a reroll, force somebody else to do a reroll, things like that.
That's interesting.
It's really, I played a couple of games at either Con of Champions or DCC days online. I can't remember. And I got in some Lankmar games, and I was like, "Oh, this is dope. This is really cool." It sucks when somebody rolls a 1 because you're like, "I'm going to use it this round," and then he gets wiped out. You're like, "Son of a-"
Does that include the judge? The one, or is it only amongst players?
Only amongst the players.
All right, we can
if
implement
we
it.
played with Levi, we'd be in trouble. He rolls 1-1 every round, so we never have luck.
Yeah, he's named Botch for a reason.
And Dark Trails has something similar. It's called boons and hexes. When you roll a natural 20, you get a boon, and when you roll a 1, you get a hex. And then you can use a boon to counteract the hex. But if you're carrying a hex, it gives you some disadvantages on certain types of rolls, like -2 here and there and stuff like that. So it's kind of it's sort of an in between. Like you still have your regular luck, and then you have this other layer which can be used for storytelling or combat.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of approaches to trying to implement luck or advantage, disadvantage kind of stuff, but those are kind of cool to feel like, because I think that gambly element to it kind of adds to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it before you lose it of fleeting luck. Man, I had like 3 or 4 points and someone rolled a 1. I was like, no.
Well, and I think it creates an incentive to pay attention too. If you got people who are kind of a little ADD, kind of looking away, maybe focus a little bit heavier just so they can keep track if they get extra points,
Right.
That's cool. So we've been talking a lot about DCC.
We're seeing a lot of games doing this now, where they're injecting these party systems. They're not player systems, or like kind of party-based systems. And we're seeing it with a lot of games. The 2D20 systems have it. The Zweihander system we're using has it. DCC has it. Like, it's interesting that they're all coming up with these party systems that every player gets to interact with, like a party pool to pull it from and putting back in. So it's kind of like a new wave sort of thing in TTRPGs versus the old school. This is my character. It's what it does.
Yeah, and it makes sense because you're with these other players, with these other characters for a specific reason. Either you have a common goal, or you work well together, or sometimes you don't work well together, and that's the storytelling aspect of the party. And so the Star Wars from Fantasy Flight Games has like the light and dark side tokens and stuff, same thing. And then Bert just ran us through Shadowrun and Fate Accelerated. And you have it's your own personal fate points, but you can easily pool that into like a group fate thing, and use it. And it makes a lot of sense, because sometimes one character is going to be able to affect the actions of another character. And that can be done by tossing a luck to somebody, or whatever kind of token you want to call it, in their moment of need.
I really, really like the way that Fantasy Flight handles that for the Star Wars game. I thought the one time I got to play it, it was a really neat system. How you can basically hand the die and it upgrades to the next die up.
Oh, that's cool.
So not a fan of rolling 14 dice and then having to sort them all out, but
I'm not a fan of what the dice are, but I'm a fan of the idea.
The game, I mean, I've played a couple, and it's fun. I really like it. It's just, if you're not doing it online with something that's sorting all your stuff out for you, the first time I was like, really, I have to roll these 14? All right, okay. And then he was like, all right, this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here. And now that I've played enough, I'm like, all right, I can just kind of look at it and be like, yeah, it's fine. Sure. But at those first couple, it's really like a steep learning curve. And if you're just walking by the table and you see that, you're going to be like, nope.
The dice, they're not, but they look like the predator symbols. Like when you see them like blinking on the arm.
Oh,
it's like,
interesting. Yeah.
predator symbols on there. You're like, I don't know what any of these dice just said, but
Yeah.
that person can read them. It's like another language.
I played a lot of X-Wing when it first came out, and so the symbols there's some similarities in between. And I was like, oh, I see what's going on here. All right, cool. I get it. So, but yeah, definitely some really cool new mechanics party-wise and stuff. And I love that DCC feels like old school D&D, but it has these really cool modern things in it that really make the game a lot more fun. Like disadvantage, advantage. I have a great story about this. So Gen Con last year, I ran D&D Adventures League for Baldwin Games, and so I was in like one of their hotel rooms, and one of the other guys worked at Wizards. And we were just talking about D&D, as you do, because you're all DMs at Gen Con for D&D. And we started talking about how I personally thought advantage disadvantage was super cool because not everyone has the math skills to do like the old school THACO and everything like on the fly. And I teach kids how to play D&D, which I'll get back to, and that would have been disastrous for them. So this whole something good's going your way, roll 2, take the higher. Something's bad, roll 2, take the lower. I think it's a fantastic mechanic. Almost didn't make it into the game, he tells me. He's like, there were 2 groups in the company. There were the anti and the pro, and the antis almost won out. And I was like, oh my God, 5e probably would have sucked.
It's interesting to see what the other option was.
Yeah, I'm curious as well. I suspect that they were still in that crunchy mind state coming out of 4. From going from 3 to 3.5 to 4, where it was like, okay, layer on another +2 and another +2 and one of these and one of these, and here's a card, here's a power card and blah blah blah. I can't. That's what turned me off to 4. We played 3.5 all the way up until 5 came out, just because my players. I had a 6-year campaign going with 7 players, and they were like, we looked at the books and we don't want to change it. I'm like, it's fine for me. It's less money and, brain power to change.
We did that for a while and then made the jump Pathfinder. And when you saw how well kind of it was doing, and it was heavy, even more heavy and crunchy in some ways, 3.5 was like, I could see where there might have been people on 5e who were like, hey, we need to compete with this, because before he did not go over well. I think across the D&D population.
Very polarizing. Like, weed is polarizing. I don't know.
but it is safe to say it was at least polarizing, if nothing else. Yeah. But so I'm sure when 5e came out, I'm sure there was a lot of discussion about, do they want to try to compete crunchy-wise, or do they want to go to something more narrative? So I just see the difference.
I don't know that they went more narrative. They just, combat, we all know, combat takes a long time. And being able to just do that instead of, okay, let me see, +2, he's got cover, +4, -2, stuff like that. It made combat super fast suddenly. I can just be like, I could look at the board or look at the situation and be like, advantage, disadvantage, nothing, because they cancel out, whatever. So I really am a fan of that mechanic specifically.
It's definitely streamlined, that's for sure.
But I still play DCC, and then it's all like, okay, 2 for that, and 2 for this, and 1 for this.
Now, what I always kind of find interesting is as we've come along, we have all these technologies that allow us to play online and do things like set up macros, which takes a little programming understanding to do these sorts of things in Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds, things like that. But as we've gotten to where we have more ability to make some of that stuff easier, we have streamlined a lot of systems down to rules that are already just easier on their own for when you're playing at a table. And back in the day, we were like, had the complicated math, and we had to write it all out at the top in like an equation so that we knew what we were doing.
My first character sheet is just me adding up stuff for combat every round on the back of it. Like that was like, oh, okay, you're gonna give me a 2 for that, and then all right, and I roll, and then nope, I missed his THACO by 1.
Now you were talking about teaching it before. Make sure we go back to that there.
So a couple years ago, I decided that because I could see D&D getting super popular, what they say 40 million people playing or something. It's insane.
Pretty incredible.
I thought that, considering that when I was growing up, it was like 40 people playing D&D.
Yes, it felt that way, yeah.
I thought it would be cool to teach kids how to play role-playing games, D&D specifically. And the reason it started with D&D is because the kids saw Stranger Things and they're like, "What's that? D&D?" And they would pick up a book and they would try to read it and they'd be like, "I don't get it." And so I made like a tiered system where 2-hour sessions. The first session is welcome to Dungeons and Dragons. We talk about what the game is. We make their first character. I streamlined it down to a 9-step process, which stripped out a ton of stuff. But it was just like, you can be an elf, a dwarf, a halfling, or a human. You can play cleric, fighter, rogue, wizard, period. That's it. That's all we started with.
Back to the old school.
And then we did standard array just so they would get... and then I took the character sheet. I have to have one around here. I took the character sheet and I stripped half of the stuff out of it. And excuse me while I just walk off here.
Yeah, that's okay. We can still hear you. That's the important part at the moment.
And it's the green folder. Where's the green folder, Chris?
Well, while you're hunting there, I do have a question. What age group are we talking about?
That's the guy.
My youngest player is 6.
Oh, wow.
And my oldest player just turned 16.
Oh, interesting.
So, and it comes down to like siblings. I have one group. I got it. I have one group that is 50% girls, playing with their brothers and some other people. And overall, I built it up to 40 kids currently.
Wow, man, that's pretty
40
successful.
Kids that I have introduced. And I pitched it to the parents like, well, the things that they're going to get out of it are social skills and problem solving and critical thinking and teamwork and waiting their turn. And it reinforces math and reading. And the parents were like, sign us up. Stop talking and sign us up. All right. So I made these character sheets and they just have outlines of characters and stuff. I'm trying to make sure I get them in there. And then the 6 abilities, I kind of pointed to body parts specifically because the kids aren't going to know dexterity or constitution or charisma. And so it looks like, the character sheet looks like a spreadsheet, Pathfinder more than anything. So this was a way that they could just color in their thing and they kind of make the character their own, but it's not like super intimidating.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I did that, and then
that is badass. Yeah, just Josh, I agree. That's a very cool thing to do.
And then
I want them for my characters in 5e right now anyway.
So I whipped up. I basically just highlighted parts of the character sheet that are on it. It tells you what to do, and then you just keep following along.
Oh, nice.
Step 3, step 4, right? And there's 7 or 8 steps, and I would just sit at the table with them and be like, okay, let's do step 1. Do you want to be a dwarf, an elf, a halfling, or a human? They all kind of knew what they wanted already. They knew their class, they knew their race, so that was super easy. And then I was like, okay, let's talk about what our ability scores. This one right here. What are ability scores, and what do you need them for? What kind of character? So some of them say like helps with spells or attack, defense skills, hit points, stuff like that, because they're coming in totally new to the game.
Yeah,
and they, there's a lot of vocabulary. So now I have these 6-year-old kids going, I'm going to make a dexterity check against their blah blah blah, saying sentences that you would never expect 6-year-olds to say, because I think. I was, it's got to be 79, so I was 8 at the time when I started playing, and we were like, hey, what's this word mean?
You look it up in your encyclopedia.
Get a dictionary.
You didn't have a phone in your hand to just type it up immediately and know.
Right. So I've been doing that for, gosh, I think I just passed 2 years now.
Oh, that's great.
And Oh, I can give you character sheets. I can give you copies. It's a whole PDF thing.
Oh, that would be sweet.
I'm no
Just
artist.
as Josh says, it's hard for him to find good sheets, so he's super interested in it.
We can talk about that too, because we made 2 character sheets to go along with this adventure that we just finished for 2 Old Guys games.
Sweet.
Yeah, character sheets. It's Brendan and I were talking about this over at Defenders of Kobold, and I showed him like a preview of those sheets we made, and he's like, "Whoa!" He's like, "You guys found an opportunity to make a character sheet something more than just a character sheet, and you turned it into a piece of art." And it wasn't me, because I am the writer. I am not I call myself graphically impaired.
I hear you on that one.
I can Photoshop the crap out of something, but give me like a pen and say draw a dog. I could maybe do Snoopy.
I'm the opposite. I can draw. I can't do anything digitally. I'm horrible.
Oh, well. Yeah, Photoshop. So like all of those character sheets, I basically threw it into Photoshop, cut the character sheet up into the boxes on a separate layers. And then I was like, we don't need skills right away. We don't need this right away. We don't need this right away. And so basically I turned it into old school D&D. You have 4 races, 4 classes. You have your ability scores. You have some spells or some weapons. Let's go fight. Let's go. So the first hour of the first session, we do that. We talk about it. We talk about advantage, disadvantage, what you can do in combat, stuff like that. And then the second adventure, or the second hour, is a mini adventure. They've just graduated from this Adventures Academy. They're now full certified guild members. They can take on contracts, blah, blah, blah. Someone comes running into town talking about goblins attacking farmers, coming to market, and then off they go. And it's like this moral thing, because it's not really goblins. It's kids dressed up like goblins who are stealing food because they're homeless and hungry. Inevitably, the cabin in the woods always gets burned down. It's like an 80%. I kept track of like what happens to this cabin after the first one. Literally 80% of the kids burned it down. 99% of the kids are chaotic neutral.
And you were halfway to a master's thesis in psychology. If you just take that data and do something with it, you can get some credentials behind your name in no time.
I already wrote a paper. I'm in a grads program for a master's in education to be a science teacher, and I already wrote a paper talking about teaching kids D&D, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. One of my teachers said, you had better include this Dungeons & Dragons stuff in this assignment. And I was like, yes, sir.
Absolutely. That was going to be my question. I was curious what your avenue was there. If you were, coming to educators and saying, hey, we should try this, or if that was something from within a school system already, or what. But
we were, I was doing it at my local game store, Board Game Barrister in Greenfield, which we just found out they're closing. I was so torn up because so many 7 years of memories at that place since I came back from Europe, and I was just torn up when I found out earlier. Last week that they were closing that one. It's not all of their stores, but that was my store. That was I ran Adventures League there. I ran DCC. I started a whole side business teaching kids. So that was really a hard blow. But since March, we've been playing online anyway, obviously, because the world is topsy-turvy at the moment. But yeah. I got to share. And then we did this extra RPG session every month where we played Gaslands. I made scores of cars and big cork racetrack that took up like 4 actual tables. And we played one of the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, and we played the girls like this RPG called Warriors. It's based on some young adult books from Random House. It's absolutely terrible. There's no die rolling or anything. I'm gonna throw it into Fate, and we're gonna play it in Fate now. I think they're like cats. They're all magical cats. Not even magical. They're just cats.
They're just cats.
Yeah, they're cats, and there's clans of cats, and some are better at some things than others, and they go on these adventures.
If you need some real fun, light rules games, I know some people who have some things like Honey Heist, where you're just some bears trying to steal honey, and what is it, Crash Pandas, where you're a bunch of raccoons that have to drive a car. Like
all the girls read these Warriors books. It's a huge thing. There's like 20 of the books or something, which makes me think I should have gone into writing young adult books for
Young adult books.
It doesn't look that hard. But in the back of some of them, they have these mini adventures. And so I've just been getting them from the library and running them through the adventure and then giving the book back to the library. And then Gasland, Star Wars. I played DCC. They love the fact that their characters died. They thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, "Oh, your character just got cut in half." And they're like, "What? Is he dead?" I'm like, "Yeah, he's cut in half."
We don't know yet. You got to
Like,
roll him
sweet.
over. Roll him over. Let's see if he's dead.
Roll him over. His feet don't roll over.
That's really fascinating that their first response to that is that they were into it, because like I think back as a kid, like that wasn't necessarily the reaction I would expect. Sometimes kids haven't quite matured through certain phases, and I imagine there's certain things at the gaming table that are hard for them to kind of get to. Like what are the challenges you're finding there?
Character loss is definitely one of them, but one of the things I feel that D&D teaches you is your actions have consequences.
Yes.
So if you go swimming in the Black Lake in the Forge of Fury and you don't know that the dragon's there, the dragon's going to chomp you in half. And it did. It critical hit his character, chomped a foot section out of him, and his two pieces just floated away.
Man.
It like tripled his hit points. It was brutal. And the whole table was just like, for a second. But no one's cried at the table.
That's good.
You have to tell the story sometimes. So I'll have characters that maybe should have died, like the cleric, but the cleric utterly refused to loot any dead body. If the party gathered stuff up, she would be like, "No, I'm not taking that. That was on a dead person." So when her character fell in battle and should have died, what happened was she's a god of knowledge cleric like Ogma or something. I just kind of put her in limbo with a beam of light down onto a pedestal with an open book that was writing her story. And it started continuing to write. And so her god was talking to her like, I'm not ready for you to come back. You have to do this. But she did get a quirk out of it where anytime she touched a book that she had not read before, she had to stop everything she was doing and read that book, even in the middle of combat, which then all the other players would jump around. They got really good at teamwork. Like, we can't let her get hurt. And they would jump in front and start fighting off whatever was there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, I mean, one of the things that kind of caught my eye here is just Josh was saying that he got a little argument with his DM, and that's something that happens at tables, right? Players and DMs sometimes get into disagreements over, rulings or whatnot. And it's an important thing to kind of learn how to address, how to do it appropriately, and all that kind of stuff. And I imagine that's something that comes up with youngins in particular.
Yeah, I wanted them to know that if they do something really stupid, it's entirely possible their character will die. If they're trying really hard to be a team player, to play a character, and her refusing to take anything off of... Because what's the first thing I'll do when we finish combat? Loot the bodies! And she was like, I can't take any of that. And so that was a really solid role player thing for her to do. And so I didn't want that character to suffer from a bad dice roll.
Yeah.
But the other one who dove into the water when they already knew there was a big creature somewhere in the cave, he kind of deserved to get chomped in half because he was swimming with a black dragon.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, there's a lot of things, kind of grow from other experiences. So, like, at least at our tables, it seemed like once somebody was getting into role playing and making decisions that weren't just like stuffing my pockets with loot and finding the coolest thing I can, it seemed like it was contagious and kind of went around the table, and other people started picking up on it. So, I imagine that like experience that you just had there with the young girl was like pretty good for that, in terms of kind of getting the rest of the group on board with role playing. Did you find that to be the case, or was that just kind of one person was into it and the rest were just going, okay.
No. There's a couple other that are definitely they sit down at the table and they have a mindset of their character.
That's cool.
It is like herding cats when you have 7 kids between 6 and 12 at the table, and so there's a bit of fiddling about and wandering off and stuff like that. But I've learned, if anything, I've learned in grad school is their minds aren't done. They don't have full self-control. Sometimes it's hard for them to focus for a long time, which is why I made the game sessions only 2 hours. If they wander off for 5 minutes, so what? Parents are paying me to manage their kids for a couple hours and teach them how to play this game and hopefully some valuable life skills, because D&D taught me all kinds of valuable life skills when I was a kid.
Yeah, I feel like we're talking about that a lot lately. A lot of our episodes we've kind of touched on.
It has been. We've been on like a streak of that recently.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true though. I mean, it keeps coming up, and like guest after guest has got an example where they learned something or they developed in a certain way because of gaming. And I'm certainly one of those people. Like, I've learned so much from gaming and learned how to interact with people and how to get through like weird situations and, like you said before, teamwork and all those other skills. I feel like have been heightened as a result. And let's see, I'm trying to keep up with the chat while I'm talking here.
I was just reading. He says, Josh was saying role playing's best, expressly give you a curveball. Yeah, I never took an improv course in my life. I did take some acting classes when I first started college, and I have friends that are in improv, so I've watched a bunch. But we did comedy sports was a new thing way back when I was a kid too, and so we did some improv things just back and forth between us. It wasn't like exercise for the game or anything, but I think that makes certain connections when you're a kid. It makes certain connections in your brain that allow you to make these creative decisions on the fly fairly rapidly. And so that would be an interesting study, because I have a bachelor's degree in molecular biosciences and biotechnology.
Oh,
and
cool.
So to see if an adult who starts playing RPGs as an adult and a kid who starts playing as a kid, to see if the adult's brain is able to make the same type of connections, like physical gray matter connections. Right. Because there's people using D&D as therapy, which I think is super cool.
Very cool.
Which, leads me to like the table has to be a safe space. And I always tell the kids, I'm like, everybody is inclusive. You can't tell anybody, or everybody is included. You can't tell anyone how to run their character. This is a safe space. If you have a problem, you can talk to me, or you can go talk to one of your parents over at the table, at their table. I said, but everybody has a right to be here, and everybody is an equal at this table until you make me, the DM, mad and I hit you with lightning. Yeah.
It's bound to come up eventually.
Which I don't. But some of the players have these jokes like underground lightning is more common than you suspect.
It never really hits them. It just strikes at their feet the first time, right?
I'll just have something shake, like the ground shakes. And they're like, was it thunder? And I'm like, you don't know.
That's amazing.
So I'm working on teaching my kids tabletop role-playing games. And I have one who's 15, one who's 8, and one who's 4. And
wow,
so he'll be 5 in November. So we're starting to work that way. So I decided they needed something they all understood. So they're all big into Mario Brothers stuff. They all love Mario Brothers. So I'm making the Mario Brothers characters as D&D characters and just giving them basic abilities in the game, so they can. Then they understand, the basics of how it works at that point.
That's super cool. Yeah, my daughter just turned 6 this year. We role play without dice. So she has a character she named Mermaid Girl. I said, okay, Mermaid Girl, you live in this village. People come to you because they know you're a fixer of problems. So she has found aliens that were living underground, eating the crops of a farmer that she put in a rocket ship. I didn't know they were aliens at the time. She put them in a rocket ship and she took them to another planet. And I was like, oh, that's their home planet. What a great job. She solved a dispute between farmers and a giant over some cattle, because the farmers said that the giant killed their cattle and set them on fire. And he was like, why would I do that to cattle? those were my cattle to begin with, not the farmers. And so I give her these like mental exercises, moral dilemmas to prepare her to start playing D&D regularly. And she has played a couple games of D&D. My business partner, Michael, has 2 kids, and we got the 3 of them and a couple other friends' kids together, and I ran D&D. And I think they were my alpha testers for kids D&D, basically, is I saw what worked, what didn't work, and I was like, okay, I understand how. And there's other things like Hero Kids and Family, I can't remember. There's other systems that are good for kids that are streamlined, but the kids D&D thing, it had to be, the agreement with the game store was it had to be D&D because parents are calling saying my kids want to learn D&D.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I said, okay, I'll just streamline D&D. So
yeah, it really feels like gaming has kind of taken a position where folklore used to be. Like Aesop stories, that kind of stuff. You had those morality tales. And actually, I'm starting to hear an echo. Are you guys hearing that? A little bit there, maybe?
Just a hint.
Okay. So to make sure it wasn't just me going, a little loopy over here.
You're the only one that's activated, so if it is, it's your own.
All right. But yeah, I find that kind of interesting that, back in the day, you had these like stories that were kind of passed down that kind of tested children. It gave them kind of morality tales and things to consume. And there was like a little bit of a give and take between the storyteller and the child, trying to figure out how the story would unfold. They'd ask questions and you'd kind of mix it around a little bit. And it really feels like, D&D or whatever game system you're playing really is filling that position. Only it's more active. There's more creativity for them.
Interactive group storytelling is basically what I consider it. And so that's why there's a lot of times where I'll just sit at the table silently with the kids and be like, tell me what you're going to do. And one of them will be like, well, they're talking to me. They're like, well, I want to say to so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, say it. They're right there. Don't tell me. But they're so used to the school setup with the teacher. You have to talk to the teacher, not the other students.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no, talk to them. You guys figure out a plan. I have actually been like, I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. I'll come back. You guys should have a plan set up. And I'll give them like 3 minutes to hash out a loose plan on what it's not intricate, but it works. It gets them to talk to each other, and that's, and they're then driving the story up until we start rolling dice in combat or whatever.
I always thought of it, TTRPGs, as kind of the next step beyond the old popcorn storytelling game, where one person gets to tell 2 lines of a story, and then they popcorn call their friend gets to do the next 2, and we used to do that in class and go, I don't know if they do that in class anymore, but that was an exercise we used to do.
Popcorn reading and stuff where somebody reads and the teacher calls another name and stuff, but same thing.
That's mostly to get them, make sure they're paying attention. That's not creating the story. We used to actually have to create stories. That's cool. When the internet first rolled around, that's what we were doing in like IRC and stuff, is you had a channel that was specifically walk in, read the words, put in your word, and it was supposed to tell a story over time. And then it went from 1 word to 1 sentence, blah, blah, blah. But it's all collaborative storytelling, just like TTRPGs,
For sure. Now, are you finding the kids are kind of getting interested in, I don't know, not gaming necessarily, but the things that can derive from gaming, like writing, for instance? Are you finding that they're getting more creative in those ways?
Yeah, some of them have taken to painting of their miniatures, which, everybody has to do. I have boxes hidden over here of bones, Reaper's bones that I keep buying on Kickstarter and never manages to get painted. They're doing that. A couple of them are trying to take on the DM's role already, so they'll ask me for advice about that. They're in like the 13, 14 age range, which by then they should be able to DM. Yeah. And that was my goal, was run them through this, teach them that, and then have a learn to be a DM session. I've only had one learn to be a DM session. It had 2 adults in it. So that the kids could then go and run for the other kids, and eventually, like, I worked myself out of a job.
Right. Yeah.
And I told the parents this, and the parents are like, "Oh no, they want to come play in your game," and that just makes me feel good because they could totally go play in any game, but they want to come and play in my game. And considering that I'm trying to go to school to be a teacher and stuff, that's super cool that they want to come to my table and they want to be part of my story.
Well, and kids naturally want to learn, and that's kind of like the nature of people, and it's about, I think, the opportunity to have creativity and energy and excitement, right? So long as you have that available to you, I think people are engaged and they'll learn the material. But I think that's one of the things that was tough when, all three of us probably were going through school, is that it was, rote memorization, boring classes, just going through it and just like, I have to be here. I don't know if I actually care about any of this material or ever want to use it. But you get something like this sort of program where you're sneaking in education, getting the kids excited, and then they're looking to say, what's this word mean? Or how do I put together a good story? Well, okay, now I can start slipping in, rhetoric and, story designs and, level design and mathematics behind, balancing your encounters and all these other things.
Right.
And it's something that they got to, which I think is what reinforces it really quickly. Because, they understand the problem.
Yeah. I like that their minds are have such plasticity still that you throw new concepts at them, and they might not understand the concept right away, but their brain will wrap itself around that concept and take a hold of it. And now I have kids players who are min-maxing power gamers already. He's like, I'm going to be a dragonborn, and I'm going to have sorcerer and warlock. And I was like, oh, for Christ's sake, okay.
Well, it doesn't take kids long to learn that bigger numbers are better than smaller numbers.
Yeah. How can I? They went and they sat down with the player's handbook and they figured that out by themselves. And I was just like, are you sure you didn't talk to anybody or go read out? He's like, no. He's like, I just saw this in Sorcerer and this in Warlock, and with the Dragonborn, I was like, I get it. Hellish Rebuke is awesome.
Yeah.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
So there was a need to hit harder, and they figured it out. So.
And then some of the kids are just like, this is my character. If it dies, I'm going to name it Erden 2. So there was Erden, and then there's Erden 2, the Erdening. I call him the Turdening because I think it's funny and it aggravates. I get to be a kid at the table too sometimes,
Oh, that's great.
I did have a group get eaten by a giant pika, which is like a mouse, but this was like, Tarrasque-sized pika that followed them. So I made a 10-year-old go, oh my God, that's the grossest thing I've ever heard in my life. And right there, I knew that was the peak of my DM career. Grossed out a 10-year-old, I'm done. Drop the mic.
Well,
because they had to crawl out its butt, basically.
Oh, no.
I have a great picture of the whiteboard where I kind of just drew it out. And I was like, it's getting smaller and smaller. And he's like, I'm not sure we're going in the right direction. I was like, it's only one direction to go.
And that kid's is Peristolus. Yeah, it's funny. So it basically, you're working your way out of this eventually by getting these kids going. And that's maybe a segue to get to what you're doing with the actual company here. So
Sure.
We set off to talk about DCC a little bit. We kind of, I'm really interested in that topic, and we could talk about it probably the rest of the show here, but I want to make sure we talk about your guys' product line here a little bit too. So with DCC, you put together a funnel, and some people in our chat probably know what that's about, but for those that don't, can you describe what that is?
Sure. In Dungeon Crawl Classics, DCC, you don't get to choose what your character is. You randomly roll up 4 0-level peons. They're things like crap farmers or elven glassblowers. If you follow the show, apparently, there's some jokes going on like that. And then you go on your first adventure. Basically, it comes down to you're tired of being cold and hungry in winter and you want a better life for yourself, so you grab up your pitchfork and you go in search of adventure, essentially. Everyone starts with 4 in the funnel, sometimes called the meat grinder, because the very first game, for free RPG days, how I got introduced to DCC. And there were 7 of us at the table, and by the end of that session, people were tearing their character sheets off and handing them to other players because everybody had got wiped out. You lose tons of characters in DCC, and that brutal aspect of the game is the funnel, and it makes it such, you cherish that one character you have left at the end of that funnel, because they might not have been the luckiest or the prettiest or the smartest, but they survived, and so they get to be a level 1 something. And then DCC is old school, where if you're an elf or a dwarf or a halfling, that is your class. Your race is your class. If you're a human, you can be a warrior, cleric, wizard, rogue. And the dice are unforgiving. There's no sense of challenge rating in the game. So I've thrown giants at first level characters. I've wiped out, I don't know, 3 or 4 parties. And people come to play DCC because of that brutal aspect of the game, because I don't want to say it makes you feel alive, but it sure makes that character feel alive. You know, if they fall, you just see them deflate, like, oh no, someone's got to get to me and roll me over. This is my character. So we made a funnel. There are some nautical funnels out there from Goodman and some other third party, but it's not the most. Dungeon Crawl Classics is about dungeons, and Appendix N, if people don't know what Appendix N is, that is the list of books that Gary Gygax put in the back of the original D&D rule books that were inspiration for the game. Jack Vance, Andre Norton, the list just goes on and on. Tolkien, of course, and I forgot where I was going with this.
I know how that goes too. That starts to happen every year.
So Dungeon Crawl Classics is that kind of 60s and 70s fantasy, sword and sorcery kind of fantasy. But it's starting to branch out into a whole bunch of different directions, both with community stuff like Dark Trails and with Goodman Games stuff like Mutant Crawl Classics, which is the new Gamma world, basically. Post-apocalyptic, radiation mutated, really fun to play. We just played some of that too. So everybody loves pirates. So we made a nautical adventure called Sinking the Stercorarius that has no pirates in it.
Okay.
Wait, say that again?
It's a nautical adventure that has no pirates in it. It has a crew that aspires to be pirates, but you don't get to play them. We called it a multi-adventure theme system module because there are 3 options for playing the game originally. There is prisoners, where you had a kangaroo court truss you up, throw you on a ship, and they're taking you to Prisoner Island, and so you're locked up in the cargo hold. There's soon-to-be slaves, which are the worst jobs, the worst occupations I could find in terms of not being a fighter or anything. So you have like bookbinders and clerks and copyists and hat makers and honey dippers and mudlarks and knob thatchers, which are all explained in the book, who basically got bonked on the head, tied up, and are going to be sold into slavery. It's a touchy topic. We're not glamorizing it, obviously, because the goal is to overpower the slavers and break free. And then the third is society's elite, where you got an invitation to a 3-hour tour on a boat. Why not have a leisure cruise in like one of the most dangerous places on the planet, the high seas?
Naturally.
And then you're able to mix and match those things together if somebody wants to play one of these guys and somebody wants to play one of these guys. So there's some storytelling elements in the beginning that are like, okay, you want to play an elite, and then so you go to this banquet and you're having a good time and you're eating and you're drinking, and suddenly you get a little woozy and you wake up tied up in the hold of the ship with some really smelly prisoners and blah blah blah. And then it goes on from there. It's called Sinking the Stercorarius because the ship you're on, the Stercorarius, sinks. Captain Guido is not the best captain in the world. In fact, the joke in there is that he recently won the ship from in a game of cards with a guy in a cape, like Lando Calrissian. And there's lots of Star Wars references in it. And then he walks up on the ship, and there's a guy scrubbing the deck, and he's like, "You know how to run a ship?" The guy's like, "Yeah, I help run this ship." He's like, "Cool. Get a crew together, and you'll be first mate." And then he walks into the captain's quarters, and that's basically Guido. I think Guido, during the Kickstarter, all the updates had this little vignette at the beginning of that was like cluing you into what the story was going to be. And part of it was that Captain Guido drank all the rum, and then they were talking about transparency, and they said the culprits should be punished if they do something wrong. So then Captain Guido stabs himself and passes out, and it's just this ridiculous story that I thought would get people to read the updates every time there was one. Nice. And then I compiled that all together, and I haven't done anything with it, but I'll probably just throw it at all the backers as like, thanks for joining us on this great thing. So then I'll tell you about the first half of it, and then the second half of it is the spoilers. But there is a YouTube video that'll be out from the pirate premiere. Mm-hmm. Oh, I said the word pirates. There's no pirates in this book, but one of the Kickstarter stretch goals was a pirate theme, which was another 14 pages. This is 48.
Gotcha.
And then 14 pages of the pirate theme, where you get to play as the three officers, which is Captain Guido, first mate Scuba Guy, that's Michael, the business partner, and Scuba Guy. Yeah. One of his email addresses is actually Scuba Guy, and so I took that and I turned it into SKUBAGAI, Scuba Guy, and so that's his character in the thing. And then Warclaw, a quartermaster Warclaw, who is our friend Rory that lives up in Minneapolis. He did some art and some maps for it, and I needed a third officer. And he's very much the run the day-to-day operations, know everybody, all the crew members' names, stuff like that, where Guido is just like, do, whatever. He has, if in the pirate thing, so you roll on the occupation table. If you get a 30, you get to pick one of the officers. Along with one of the officers comes their ship's pet. So Michael wanted a Dracula parrot. So Black Spot Barney is his Dracula parrot in the game. He's called Black Spot Barney because he eats barnacles off the side of the ship and then drops black spots on everybody.
Oh, no.
Guido won a creature in a card game because he's just a relentless gambler. And he thought it was going to be super cool, and it's this tiny little armored thing that rolls up in a ball, and he's like, this is dumb. I'm going to name it Doofenschnagel. So he has a pangolin that's named Doofenschnagel. Warclaw has a two-tailed tabby cat. And if none of the officers are on, then there's Mr. Ficklefingers, the four-fingered monkey, who just hangs around and throws poop at you. But everyone gets like a +1 AC bonus if Mr. Ficklefingers is there, because you're all more aware of what's going on.
That's clever. Yeah, that's good.
+1 to armor, +1 to reflex.
Right. So the ship sinks, and in the main adventure, your goal is to get off the ship before it sinks. And that's when it gets worse, and the tentacles attack.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the reason the ship is sinking. And then we built in a bunch of mechanics like you have to swim away from the ship for 3 rounds. When a ship is sinking, I was in the Navy, so there's there's actually a nautical term for landlubber's table for listing and port and starboard and all kinds of stuff like that.
That's handy.
When a ship is sinking, it creates this downdraft current, this undertow. And so if you don't get far enough away, it's going to suck you under. So there's mechanics for swimming away from the ship fast enough so that doesn't happen. If you do get sucked under, make a strength check or make a stamina check, stuff like that. One of the other stretch goals is new creatures. So there's while you're swimming away from the ship, you might see the good jellyfish or the stinging water, which turned into this really weird amorphous creature nautical war of its own thing that's going on.
Okay.
And then you swim for a little while, and in the mists, it parts, and you find a black sand beach on an island that should not be there.
Gotcha.
And that's where it really goes DCC, because I think there's a paragraph in the book that says, from here on out, things get really weird. You as the judge can decide to just, if you need to get your people to an island for some reason, here you are. If you want to continue our story, please do. And then the Kickstarter was so successful, we hit 459% of funding,
Congratulations.
which I think ended. Thank you very much. We were really shocked. We funded in under 7 hours.
Whoa. Wow.
As
Okay.
a first time Kickstart, I was just like, what? And then we ripped through 12 or 13 stretch goals, including this magnificent piece,
Nice.
our own DCC judges screen. There's the Stercararia sinking,
Oh,
some
very cool.
crazy tentacled monster, and that poor dude is probably a player character. Chocked full of some of our stuff, some of Goodman's stuff. As a third party, if you want to be a third party publisher for Goodman Games, you have to sign a contract with them. You have to follow the stipulations, and then you have to send them everything. And so I sent this to Joseph Goodman, and within 3 hours, he was like, "That looks awesome, approved." So
Nice.
didn't have to make a single modification to this. I was utterly shocked. He also did say, "Oh, you read the whole contract and you're doing all the stuff in it. That's what most people miss." And it's really fun stuff too. Like, you have to have this license page, you have to have the logo on the front and the back covers, etc., etc.
Okay.
And then the adventure got out of control, and eventually I was like, I have to stop writing this because it's 40 some pages. All told, the backers from the Kickstarter are getting, I just totaled it up today, almost 90 pages.
Wow.
Wow, that's a pretty serious book. At that
Well,
point.
it's this and a bunch of digital stuff, because cost of printing was going up sky high, and I'm like, I'm just going to do this. And then it turned out that in playtesting, we never managed to do the whole adventure in 4 hours, so I had to put a huge timing guide in the back, like, if you have
that's
2
handy.
hours, do this. If you just want a nautical thing, do this. If you just want the weird thing, do this. If you want the whole thing, it's at least 6 hours. And then the very last stretch goal was an epilogue. So I just on Friday sat down and wrote 2,200 words for a 1 hour epilogue adventure that kind of summarizes the whole adventure and also opens up the world for the survivors. There's 2 new classes we did. There's sea shanties. A friend of ours is a musician, and he made some of the most amazing sea shanties. 2 different character sheets. Can I send you some graphics that you can throw up?
Potentially might be able to pull that off.
I'll put your Discord chat there where we are and see if he can.
Sure.
I will not be able to pull it up if you
He's
put
got
it
the
there.
overlay. I'm just here to look pretty.
If you put it in the Discord, I can't pull it up because that's where I'm capturing our videos right now.
I thought that's why I was here, was to look pretty.
Yeah, we brought you for that too, but you know.
Dustin, if you how would I do this without crashing my stream? That is a tricky one. I'm not sure I could pull that off on the fly here, unfortunately.
And I don't have one printed off.
Yeah, this is where we.
Reference cards, man. So I just packaged up everything today to get it to drive through. Maps for VTT and printing. I made tons of tokens. There's a streaming background for people's templates.
Oh, that's cool.
There's a desktop, we made this elaborate treasure map as the stretch goal tracker. And I just stripped off all the text and gave that to people as the desktop. And then the stretch goals are the 1 hour extra adventure, the 2 new classes, which build off of what because they survived this, they qualified to be these things. The pirate theme, where you get to play the crew of the Stercorarius and or the officers. the reference cards for all the new creatures and items in it, and then 2 new character sheets. One is completely hand drawn by Warclaw. Totally blew my mind when I saw it. Both in 1-up and 4-up. And they're different. He literally made a whole new sheet for the 4-up. I was like, well, just shrink that down. He's like, no, I'm going to do this. He's the artist. I'm the practical guy. And then this other one that I made, which is a ship's wheel in the center, and you have all of your abilities in it, and like your saving throws and stuff, and it's all nautical themed.
Oh, that's cool.
All of that and the sea shanties are going out to everyone this week, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's amazing.
So what was the play testing like for you? Because obviously with time constraints, that's something you have to figure out in the hard way. And every story I know I put together and what Dustin's put together, I'm sure, always seems like it goes 2 or 3 times longer than you intended to.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the case you ran into?
And that's great. I mean, buy a 4-hour adventure and get 8 hours of fun out of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you can be like, well, that $15 was really only $7.50 twice for 2 adventures or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a distinct line in this adventure where you're like, here, this is one adventure, and then you could go do something else, or this is another adventure, and you could lead this into something else.
Right. Yeah.
Because I've read so much appendix, and that I was like, I'm going to have the weirdest. There's squid-headed humanoid creatures in the second half.
Nice.
Yeah, it's totally bizarre, but I thought it was absolutely awesome. And then I decided that this was going to be a series of adventures.
Oh, there you go.
With a whole bunch of secret plot twists I can't talk about now, but there's probably going to be 4 adventures in this series. In between some other stuff, I'm tired of writing about these guys. I think everyone's tired of playing with me and hearing me talk about it. So the next thing I'm going to do is called Metal Up Your Dice Hole, and it's based on 80s heavy metal.
Yeah, heavy metal magazine. Nice.
So that's already partly written. That's going to be a 4-part thing as well. I don't know. I like to make trilogies and quadrilogies or whatever they're called. So, yeah. So Sink of the Stir Cararius is in approval at drive-thru. We're doing fulfillment ourselves on the physical stuff. So 2oggames.com/shop is where that is all at.
Just drop the link in there. I'm on
Perfect.
There you go. And yeah, it was a whole bunch of fun to write. But the Kickstarter. So we launched the Kickstarter on March 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
Between March 10th and March 12th, I lost all 3 of my jobs.
Wow. Man.
And then two of the tiers in the Kickstarter were physical play sessions at GaryCon.
Yeah, that's
on
rough.
March 27th and 28th, which didn't happen because it became an online con. We did get most of the players online, and they played. And we have some free swag that we're going to send them in their packages because they didn't get the proper experience. Mm-hmm. But what a weird time to have a Kickstarter.
It really is.
Kind of knew it was coming. Like in February, we kind of saw something was going to happen. But we were ready. I had been writing feverishly since December when I had this brilliant idea for this crazy story. And Michael's like, yeah, let's do that. And so we keep collaborating. And then I sent the Kickstarter to Joseph Goodman, which you also have to do. And he gave the most invaluable feedback. That dude is like a font of seriously cool information if you want to publish stuff for his games, because he wants you to succeed too. And it shows he wants you to succeed. And he said, well, because we originally said we were just going to do a PDF, fulfillment was in April because it was mostly done.
Yeah, super easy to do. Yeah.
He's like, well, why don't you hang it out till like June or something? And that turned the book from a hastily thrown together PDF of all the stuff that was already written to this finely crafted tome I hold in my hand.
Well, that's cool, man.
the first proof. I'll show you. Like, you look at something and you're like, yeah, that's cool, and then you change it, and then you're like, oh my god, it's so much better. This was the first proof.
Oh yeah.
Lots of white space.
Nice.
Kind of thing. This just wasn't finished. I really like that. We'll probably, I don't know, use that.
It's good luck.
But then it's the same image. It's just a different.
Oh yeah, more
less
space
contrast in the back, so the words kind of pop a little more. Someone told me to do this diagonal thing with the text, so that's like we read, and then I just wrapped 2/3 of the judge's screen art basically around. So these were I thought were the two coolest images. Because I have like 20 or 30 adventures from Goodman, and I was like looking at this and looking like this, and so this is what it looks like now. This is some anachronistic thing. It's super cool. It's just not this one.
Right. Yeah.
And then I have a plan that I'm gonna package up all the other stuff, and then there'll be like this 86-page. I want to call it the Black Sails Edition because of the pirates, but I feel like I might get sued. The show.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Like 2 seconds in.
You got to worry about coming back.
Call it the Black Spot Edition. I could probably get away with that. I don't know. But yeah, I really want, and then have like a super cool cover on it. But who wants to? Unless it starts hitting like gold status or whatever. I don't know. Anyway.
Now, who's the artist on that, by the way?
Jennifer Greenfield, a local Milwaukee artist, did this for us.
Cool.
These 3 pieces. As a matter of fact, it looks like this. So they're all separate pieces that I then scanned in and kind of lined up and stuff. And then we were talking about the hinges on the judge's screen, like what are we going to do with the hinges? And we came upon this kind of treasure chest hinge thing, and she made these.
Yeah, that's a good look. I like that.
And it totally changed everything in regards to what the judge's screen looked like. And she's actually offering unique oil on canvas through our online shop in several different sizes that Chuck.
Yep.
I'm Chuck. Arrived. Several different sizes. We've just sent a couple out. There's a tweet on our wall right now that shows images of the examples, but she doesn't even make it until the order comes in, so nobody has any idea what it's going to be. And the two she's made are totally different, but it's all visual elements from the adventure. So yeah, Jennifer Greenfield. We hired some fantastic artists from Twitter, like Rachel Maduro, who did. Where's the image I want to show you, as opposed to the image I don't want to show you? The spoiler image.
Okay, there we go.
No. Man, who wrote this thing? It's like here it is. That's her work.
That's a rough time.
Yeah. I think I called it Recruiter Terror or something, the name of it. So she did that creature, and then Jennifer made this creature based off of Rachel Maduro's work. Domil's Wondrous World, we used her ship maps that I then partially sunk. She was like, yeah, go do whatever you want with it, because I back her on Patreon at the whatever commercial level there. And Rory Claween did a map and some art and the character, the hand-drawn character sheet. He's Warclaw in the book and the stories. Frank Turfler Jr., Frank T on Patreon, did another map for us. I've been backing him on Patreon for like 6 years or something, and he just does some amazing stuff. And am I missing someone? Let me make sure. I don't want to miss anyone.
Yeah, that would be rough.
Oh, wait. I have the book right here. Let's see. Edited by me. Layout by me.
It's somewhere in here.
Rory, Frank, Domil, Rachel, Nope, I got everyone. My business
Nice.
partner, Michael, bunch of play testers, 265 Kickstarter backers. Thank you so much,
That's
everybody.
very cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
It's a dream come true since 1980.
Well, congrats. So obviously it's a funnel, and there's playtesting involved in that. And I'm kind of curious, how fatal is this thing? Is it taking out 90% of characters? Like, what are we looking at?
There's opportunities for it. I kind of give this sliding thing because not all tables want that level of lethality, right? I want it to be brutal. I want everyone to sweat whether or not they're going to have something, a character in Act 3, but some people don't. So in the book, I say, if you want to make it less lethal, do this. If you want to make it more lethal, do this. The guards in particular, because we play tested mostly the prisoners thing just to see how it ran. And the guards, because I improv so much, generally were more interested in looting the crates in the cargo hold and running for it than like fighting the prisoners. They're like, nope, we're out of here. So playtesting is what made me realize that this is never going to fit into 4 hours. And then when we ran the Pirates world premiere on Defenders of Cobalt, a lot of the feedback was put in some advice on timing for the whole thing. And so that's where that last page in it comes from, where it's literally like, here's a 2 hour, here's a 4 hour, here's this, here's that.
Yeah, that's tremendously useful. Like,
I was under the impression with DCC, and I've only played one funnel, and we didn't all have multiple characters. We were all just an individual character in it. So I didn't play in a true funnel the way that you play them. But I was always under the impression that the purpose of the funnel was to whittle 24 characters down to 5 or 6 that you need for your party to take off from level 1.
It's not even that you need for your party, because you don't know who's going to survive. And if you get, if you get 2 halflings, what do you do? Because only one can be the lucky halfling. Do they fight over it? That would be fun to watch. But if you get a bunch of humans surviving, and almost there's even a thing in here where we didn't put race into any of the occupations. If somebody wants specifically to play a race, they can. I gave them a table to roll on and stuff like that. It's just kind of. Because, see, now you're thinking high fantasy power gaming, where the Fellowship had the correct number of elves, dwarves, hobbits, and humans, as opposed to DCC, which is, oh shit, are we going to survive this? And, all right, who's still alive? Raise your hand. There's your party. That's what the funnel is more like. There's no rhyme or reason, just like making the characters is random. At the end, who survives is kind of random, too. And that's fun, because then maybe you're going to play a character you weren't prepared to play, or that you might not have played yourself. Not everyone likes a monk or a cleric or whatever. But the fact that a race is class for those other 3 is cool, because they're unique. The dwarves the dwarves are very dwarf, the elf are very elf, and the halfling are very halfling. But you could get a whole group of elves or dwarves or humans who all want to be warriors or whatever. And then, to me, it's up to the judge to just keep the game being fun and challenging.
Right, yeah. Well, I mean, it's similar to Zweihander.
Oh, it's easy to make it lethal.
For sure.
Most of them have like 1 to 3 hit points, so it's not hard to make it lethal.
There's another adventure we have in the works called The Lost Caverns of Skarnaskus. And in play testing, I killed 10 PCs in one second. Something happened, dead, 10 PCs. It just went around the table with a stamp. That was the fun part. Yeah, so there's another scene in there where something happens, and I clapped my hands and was like, that was your character, squished between blah, blah, blah. And everyone at the table just froze for a second, like, and the first response was, who designed this place? Which, as the designer, I was like, that's exactly what I want to hear.
That's definitely the experience we got in our game when we did DCC.
Yeah.
As we did that tournament, and it was what was it called? It was something of Thackalon or something.
It was the Black Heart of Thacula the Undying. Which,
man, that was brutal.
With games in DCC, it was a Gen Con exclusive a couple of years back for a tournament.
Yeah, and they make their tournament modules extra lethal.
Man, it was rough.
They're upwards of 80-85% on almost everyone. They just started releasing stats of for the Lankmar con adventures, like where everyone dies and what percentage makes it to this or this or this.
That was the module when I ran it, so I got to look at all that ahead of time, and I was like, okay, so these are the rooms clearly where things go wrong.
Yeah, and that's what also makes DCC so fun is sometimes a character's going to die, and you just have to. Chuck makes us have backups.
Well, he learned that from experience. I've watched enough Defenders of Cobalt that I watched the first time when they had to take a break, go make new characters.
Yeah, I've watched him roll. It's lethal as hell just from his dice.
Well, yeah. So if you're using Roll20, you're most likely gonna die. I had an occultist in Dark Trails. The day after, the session after we had played some MCC, and I literally had a streak, like a 2-day streak going of sub-8 rolls in Roll20 trying to use magic or something, or like my mutant power. And I was just like, oh my God, I hate this game. Because the occultist, my occultist, which is basically like a wizard in DCC, when I made him, I was like, all right, corrupt by dawn, he's going to throw every spell he can, every chance he gets, and I just slung spell after spell after spell, and a bunch of them fizzled, and I was like, oh, that was disappointing.
Yeah, it's a harsh game sometimes. Like we definitely had our streaks of really terrible rolls, but we lucked our way, and I say lucked, like seriously lucked our way into the second floor of that thing, and then promptly got our asses handed to us.
They probably went to the hardest room on the second floor for didn't see anything more on that entire floor. So, and those videos, by the way, are on our YouTube channel. You can still watch them fail over and over if you look hard enough. You can find it out there.
There's that link for
it. In the background when I'm writing, I tend to watch. I end up watching either Defenders of Cobalt or Adventures in Lollygagging or. Who else am I watching lately? Like, I'll just throw it on one screen and I'll write on the other one. I won't even be listening because I'll have like 80s metal or sea shanties or whatever. I listen to so many sea shanties writing this adventure. Kind of burned out on them.
Oh, yeah.
Just for a minute. I have a playlist of them because I play a pirate character in our 5e game, and so I have some I listen to usually before game sessions if I get a chance. So
I'll send you some of the ones we have here.
Fantastic.
Just have half of them right now. People in Wisconsin are like, I'm getting out of the city and going camping. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say no. You have to finish these. You're my, 20 friend of 20 years. I'm not going to be like, no. The deadline was. We don't even have the books. Everything took slightly longer than expected.
Yeah, everyone's readjusting. Yeah.
I think by now most people are a little on the understanding side if things are slower to get there. Like,
plus we're over. I feel like we're over. It's way more adventure than I thought it was going to be. What's the term? Over
budget?
No, surprisingly we're not actually.
Just over stuff.
Over stuff. Yeah.
Budget.
Yeah, that's. I don't know what the term is either. I'm lost on it as well. Chat's gonna have to save us at some point here, but
with so much more stuff than we expected to give to them in this book. Not to mention the other 8 PDFs that everybody gets.
That's cool. So definitely.
That'd be crazy.
As somebody who backed a Kickstarter for a video game about 8 years ago and it still ain't come out, don't worry. People are going to be there for you. You ain't got to worry about it. So,
but everyone knows which one that is too.
Probably back to myself. The key, I think, is putting putting out the updates, put out the update. And then then there's great things where I was like, after the Kickstarter, I'm like, okay, we're only going to put out updates every 2 weeks. I don't want to inundate you with the smallest stuff. And then promptly after I said that in the update, I forgot to do an update. And I was like, hey, remember when I said we were just going to do them every 2 weeks and 17 days went by? Nope, me neither. Good. Let's move past that. Because, you start getting nervous after 3 weeks, like, these guys take my money. And granted, I think the average tier was like, I don't know, $8 or $10. But still, I feel personally responsible for every one of those dollars that were given to us.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So
that's the way it rolls. Yeah. So that's great. So yeah, people, we had that link in there earlier for 2oggames.com/shop. Go check that out. And it sounds like there's an episode up on Defenders of Cobalt if you want to watch the gameplay. So
not yet. It'll be on their YouTube channel.
Okay.
Chuck, as soon as I get the books and start fulfillment, you can open that up to everybody.
All right. So
it's
locked down until then.
Ready. He just hasn't hit broadcast on it yet, so you can't see it yet.
It's just on. Yeah, it's unlisted, so that the backers would have a chance to see it first.
Yeah, excellent. Yep. So definitely want to check that out.
Without the people that took a chance on a couple of guys that have their first Kickstarter up and running for a TTRPG adventure. Without them, without those 265 people having the faith to back us, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now, probably.
Well, I'm glad that you did. That's a great success. It's one of those things I like to see too, because like there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of talent, good ideas, and they don't make it. They don't get to get in front of somebody else, and so it's really a cool time to be around. With Kickstarter as an option, with publishers being really cool about taking a chance on people and getting them going.
And the community itself is really great because there's a couple guys in the Milwaukee area that are doing DCC zines and stuff. So you back them, they back you. You promote them, they promote you. We're all stronger and louder together as a community. So be inclusive. Sure. Don't be jackasses to everybody. And back Kickstarters for people. I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, I mean, it's good though.
Inclusivity thing, like everyone has a seat at the table.
And that's a good thing because it ties it back to our earlier conversation, and then we're creating a good culture now with the next group of gamers coming up, and making sure that the game isn't just for a handful of people who have been playing it since we've been playing it. And right. It's really good that lots of new types of people are getting involved. Like kids that you would never have expected to be interested in, a tabletop role-playing game. Your jocks or your party kids or whatever, are all finding it to be the cool thing to do now, which is a total shock to us.
They all bring their unique perspective to the table, and that develops a totally different story than you thought was going to happen. Yeah. You have those personal campaigns where, oops, I think I just hit the button. You have those personal campaigns where you just kind of wing it for a little while while the party gets together and stuff, and then maybe you'll do something that's published or whatever. I wing campaigns all the time, and the campaigns are totally different based on who's in it.
Yeah, and they should be too.
You play to their style, to their strength, to their expectations. But I still, again, always every session has to have those 3 pillars of social exploration and the chance of combat. And my players love when I go off on a tangent and they get into this totally bizarre side thing where I didn't know it was going to happen. They're in this swamp village, for example, and I start telling this weird story about this person that lives in this hut over here, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end of the session, they're like, that was the most amazing story. And I was like, made it up.
Just pulled it out, yeah. That's the thing that always gets me is that, like, if I sit down and I script out and write and come up with a really fleshed out story, it usually fizzles. Like, some of it hits, most of it doesn't. But if I get just put on the spot and I get put into a spot where I don't have anything prepped, that inevitably turns out to be their favorite part of the night, like every time. And so that's just sort of become my style at this point. Like a little skeleton of a story, some NPCs ready to go in case you need one pull out, and then just see what the players do. You know, like what are they interested in, and like you were saying, what are their personalities creating around the table. And the next thing you know, your game is nowhere near where you thought it was going to be, but it's great.
that's invaluable for, like, to tie in the inclusivity thing. What's the number one problem in tabletop role-playing games is finding someone to DM. Well, the more people we include in the hobby, the easier it's going to be to find people to run your game, so that then people like me can be a player sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, it's a thing too, where there's this weird kind of backwards mindset that the more people who come in means there's less for the people who are in it, and it's not true. Like, more tables out there in the world are just more seats for more gamers. You still have your table and your
stories, and
you never have to move past your edition you like. You never have to play a new edition. Like, your game is still there. I've never understood it.
Yeah. I've even, at the game store, I've even turned around from my table and been like, hey, you can't tell her how to run her character. That's not your job. That's her job to run her character. You're there to run your own character, so shut up. You throw that pitchfork if you want to throw that pitchfork.
Yeah.
Something like that, you know? Because
I have a question they'll ask.
Yeah, but nobody should be bullying somebody else. Even if it is the most logical decision that will help the party the best, let them play their character how they want, because it's their damn character.
Yeah, that's their experience. You can't rob it from somebody else.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, well, earlier we were talking about some of the kids getting interested in becoming a DM or GM or whatever you want to, what word you want to fit in there. Now, was that something you felt like you kind of encouraged, like, and then they got into it, or was it just like they just came out of nowhere and decided they wanted to do it?
The kids that are doing it were the ones that picked up the books first, which so inevitably they're gonna, not inevitably, there's a lot of people that pick up the books and don't ever run a game, but I knew that there was an interest there in a couple of them, and they live a bit of a distance away, and we only get together like once a month or two online. Now it's every 2 weeks for just 2 hours. So there's lots more of game time that they could be doing. So I think DMing is it's like a learn by watching kind of thing. You know, you can read all the books on DMing, and I have books over here on DMing that I've never read that I probably should. I don't know. But you learn by watching someone else do it. You know.
Yeah, figure out what you enjoy.
And when you start running, you learn when to do this with a die, even though there's nothing going on, or when to flub a roll, or when to pull a punch, or when to have a scene when a character should die, but they're not gonna, because you'll feel the flow of the story. But you only do that by sometimes first watching and then emulating what you see. And so I always try to be the most accepting and inclusive and sometimes flexible DM, though, you know, the min-maxers kind of get under my skin every once in a while, and then I'm like, show me that rule.
I always kind of think of it, if you think of it as an art form, I think of it like art, where like you can see an artist do art and they have a style. And everyone who picks up DMing will develop their own style.
Oh, for sure.
They probably start trying to do the way they were taught by their art teacher, their painting instructor, whoever teaches them the basics of how to do something. But eventually, if they're an artist, they're going to develop their own style, and you'll be able to recognize that style every time you see it. And I kind of feel like DMing is that same sort of process.
Yeah, because I think everyone bends towards things that they personally enjoy. You know, things that they wish they had gotten at the table that they don't currently. You bring that in a little bit. And I think, wherever your creative energy is, it usually falls where you're excited, right? Like that's something you're entertained by. So it makes sense, the different types of gamers and, are going to have different story styles or even NPCs and all that kind of stuff.
That's why with the kids, I try to make sure that we get that social explore combat kind of mechanic in there in every session, because if they're going to go off and be DMs, I want them to know that there's more than just fighting involved. You can always talk your way. You can always try to talk your way out of a situation. You should always explore the situation both physically in the game space and as well as like mentally, like, you know, let's not just burst in the door. Let's go see if there's an open window around back or things like that. Right. So I try to do that for them all the time so that when they go be DMs, they do the same thing, because I think it brings the world to life more.
It really does. Yeah.
You know, give them the sense of agency, let them run their own thing. I just ran a series of Kobold Press adventures for one of the groups of kids, and I didn't really railroad them on it, but they were dedicated to this. Like, nope, we have to go do this thing because this is the right thing to do. And I was like, that's so cool to see.
Yeah, it's pretty rare sometimes.
Yeah,
you know, especially with a group that you've been together with forever. It seems like at least our group seems to be like, is that a plot over there?
Nope.
Yeah. So sometimes we'll even just blatantly call it just to watch the DM squirm a little.
Like, oh, come on. Just go.
Always, if you're a fledgling DM, this is a good segue. We can talk about this for a little bit. If you're a fledgling DM, always have a random encounter table ready.
Yeah, it's good for stalling tactics too.
Always.
I don't know what to do in this situation.
As a matter of fact, sometimes my plans for a session are literally just the in-between bits. You were talking about like having a skeleton. I do sometimes outline stuff, and sometimes I'll write entire tomes. But when it gets to the table, I generally like traveling can be notoriously difficult sometimes.
Can be
to make interesting, and so I'm always more concerned about making that interesting instead of just going, all right, so you're on watch and nothing happens. That's not fun. And even if nothing happens, something should happen. You hear a howling off in the distance. Do you wake everybody else up? Nobody gets their sleep. Everyone's tired the next day. Stuff like that, you know. Just you got to add flavor to the world. I can't do all the Matt Mercer voices, and even Matt Mercer says not everyone DMs like Matt Mercer, which is absolutely
very true. Yeah,
but I have a repertoire of voices. You don't need voices to be a DM.
Nope.
Chuck says he only has one or two.
He's using that in my Zweihander game. It's Russian.
Is the Russian
that's
one?
The one.
Yeah. He was Russian in our Shadowrun game too.
Because I'll tell you, that's the only voice he can do is Russian. So that's the one he's got.
Yeah, I can do a bunch of them because I have a 6-year-old, and you have to read those books. Like a really great book to practice voices on is Room on the Broom, because so you have a witch on a broom that's got a dog, and these creatures keep coming up. Something happens, and these other animals keep coming up and keep asking, is there room on the broom for a bird like me or a frog like me or whatever? And my daughter was like, no, the frog has to have his own voice. No, the bird has to have his own voice. And so in one book, you have like 7 different voices, and they all had to be. So the witch is like, yes, cried the witch. Ha, ha, ha. And then the cat is like, is there room on the broom for a cat like me? You know? And so just that one book, I was like, ugh. So then in my outlines, when I write NPCs or something, I'll be like Scottish or high-pitched or whatever, just to remind myself that I should make their voice unique.
Yeah, and keep those notes handy, because, man, nothing worse than going back to a game, you're running it the next session, and you're like, what voice did I use for this character? You bring out a different one, you're like,
I'm notoriously bad, and I'm surprised that my players don't pick up on this quicker, that if an NPC does not have much of a particular voice, he's probably not one I have. That's like the immediate sign that I probably didn't have planned. If I don't have
literally just a plot sign point, like go there.
Yeah. Yep. This is improv NPC.
I think those end up sometimes being my best ones, because I don't have a preconceived notion of what they sound like in my head. So then suddenly you get like, I am Mama Uyosi. What can Mama Uyosi do for you today?
Like, crap, what is this person going to be like?
And then naming NPCs is one of
the worst.
You know what I do is I just start randomly typing on the keyboard until I see just like a couple letters that I'll put together and be like, okay, so this is where like Haldas and Mama Wiosi and all these other characters that are in the game that I'm running for Michael and some friends right now. They just show up because I hammer away on the keyboard. There are NPC name generators out there, and those are fine too. If you want to have
sometimes,
a huge list of names. Lists and tables are DM's best friends, as long as you have them organized.
Yes.
And nothing worse than like, where do I put the table I need right now?
Yeah, the names list I think is maybe the most important. Like names for characters, names for buildings, tomes maybe, and then just have those ready. Have like just as many as you could possibly have. Strike them off once you use them, and then have it handy because it's inevitable. Your players will always ask what the NPC's name is, just to be that guy.
Right.
No intention to ever talk to him again.
I might always know when I was improvising because they can hear me click-clacking in Fantasy Grounds as I'm writing down all the notes fervently about this NPC because they hone in on this NPC. But they got undead python meatloaf or alligator meatloaf or something recipe out of one of them. Just that's me improvising. I was like, he's dead. He's actually a ghost.
Next session, they go to try to find pythons.
One of the players was telling me, he's like, I did one Google search for python meat, and now all the ads are exotic.
Those algorithms are a son of a bitch, aren't they?
Like alligator steak and stuff like that. And I was like, that's amazing. That's how I love that's like the ripples in the pond from D&D. There's one thing happens in D&D, and then later on they come and they say, my life was impacted because of this, because of D&D. And I was like, that's amazing.
Well, it's like earlier you talked about a Dracula parrot. Now I have to look it up after we're done to see what that is.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
Neither had I.
Yeah.
Michael, the business partner, has this amazing knack of throwing out millions of ideas at me when I'm totally buried in something else. And sometimes they stick. Like he mentioned that his character, Scuba Guy, would be a cleric of Pelagia. Well, I don't know what that is. I had to go look it up. It's somebody else's like kind of homebrewed thing. So I sent them a message like, hey, I'm going to reference this on your site and link to it in the PDF, just so you're aware. So then, instead of having a cutlass, he had a trident. So now I just made a pirate flag with a squid head and cross tridents on it.
That's cool.
But he had also mentioned like a Dracula parrot and some other stuff. And I sometimes I'm on my own path and I'm like not listening. But I always try to include ideas. I'm terrible at taking feedback from other people. But sometimes it happens, and then you get that whole 1 page of timing for it. There's some other stuff in here that's specifically like somebody in playtesting said this, and I was like, no. And then a half hour later, I'm like, yeah.
Well, I think it's true for a lot of creatives. It's tough to sit down and know that you're like the sole content creator, and then somebody else gets their hands on it. You're like, no, this is my precious.
Writer for 13 years, man. So many of my perfectly crafted titles for my articles were totally changed, and I was like, no, you ruined it. And then sometimes I get away with something like for Overture Global, I wrote an article about women in space technology, and they let me title it the XX Expanse for the chromosomes.
Nice.
I got to use the expanse in the title, and they were like, we're fine with it. I was
That's
like,
pretty good. I like that one.
Best one ever. So
great.
That's very good. Yeah, it's I think that's the thing I'm taking from our show a lot recently. Is just that, like, there's so many different styles and different takes on things that the more people you get your ideas out in front of, generally the better. You come back getting, put through the, the wood chipper, so to speak, and you come back and like, okay, this part survived. We funneled it down to these things, and usually come out with a better piece of creative content after that, I think.
Yeah, the playtesting, the biggest thing that came out of the playtesting of this, which was almost all online cons this spring, was a lot of it was up here, and I had to write it down so other people could use it. Otherwise, they wouldn't, how did he run that? Well, nobody knows because it's in my head. So I was like, so I got to write down strategies and motivations for your NPCs. Super, especially if you're going to fight them. I know how they're going to fight because they're the crazy things running around in my head. But then I had to put that down so that each one has a kind of strategy block in there so that you, when you're running it, know what I meant originally. It doesn't mean you're going to run it just like I did or anything like it. But you get a glimpse of the personality of that character or that creature so that you see the cohesiveness of the story and the adventure altogether then.
Yeah. I know I'm writing one for the Zweihander community, and my biggest problem I have with it is that, like, I had a very loose skeleton, like Jeff says, like I go in with this kind of skeleton of what I think my story is, and then I get 6 players, and I run it with them, and that story becomes so much about them that then I have to dissect them back out. And try to take what's left and be like, now I'm going to run it with a whole nother group starting next month. And I'm already like nervous about it because I'm like, they're not the group I ran with it the first time.
That's why I do those pivot points where it's like a yes, no, maybe so, what the, burn the place down, kill everybody, stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll see if it ends up being the same story.
After I'm done with that group, so he can run it for the Kobold. So I'm nervous, but I think I am going to hand it to Chuck after that. If I can get just a rough draft of it even done, I'll give it to Chuck and be like, run it. Tell me what you think. So.
Well, that would be a good test because, I mean, just doing it twice as the same GM, obviously you're going to get a different experience, but it's a matter of how different. Like, what is the scope and the width of this story? Like, where could it go? But once you hand it to somebody else, that's jumping off the deep end.
It's not completely unknown quantities. I know Chuck and his players, so I've got a good idea how.
It's good to have somebody else run the adventure too, because Michael ran it. He actually ran it for his kids, and then he ran it for our previous D&D group. And so he really wanted plasma grenades, and I was like, "That's not that kind of adventure, man." He's telling me their session, and then he's like, "Blah blah blah, grenade," and I was like, "What grenades?" Well, in the Pirates edition, I made up black powder grenades. One of the characters starts with a pound of black powder because he's a gunner and some wick, and so he literally stuffed the wick in there, lit it on fire, and threw it at somebody. I was like, "Boom, grenade!"
That is a direction you could not have expected.
Yeah. Well, everybody likes explosions. I get it, but you don't want the ship to explode. You're on it. You're standing on it.
Just a few minutes early.
It's just a formality. He'll find the door like Leo had at the end of the Titanic, right? Just up on the door and sail away from it if it all goes down.
Yeah, because that went really well for him.
I was amazed by how creative players were in trying to create flotation devices to get off the ship. When I was like, the ship is sinking, it's knee deep right now, and you're on the top deck, you should get off the ship. And they're like, hold on, we're gonna rip this tabletop off, and it can hold like 4 people probably. I was like, yeah, sure, all right. That's where the 4 hours becomes 6 hours, because I'm like, sure, that's awesome storytelling, go for it.
And then we run down to this level because clearly there's someone with a sewing machine down there.
Right. There is. So in the adventure, we did like a liner notes thing, like old CDs and stuff.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
And there's something specifically. Michael said to me, "Why don't we let them explore more of the lower decks of the ship?" And I was like, "You mean the rapidly sinking ship?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, good point." Like nobody should be exploring that.
Very good.
Full of water.
Well, and we are rapidly running out of time here. We are hitting the last couple of minutes of the show, so we want to make sure we get a good plug in there again. So it's good that you brought it back out there. So the website that you want to go to if you want to find this wonderful product is right there in the chat. And you want to go in there and check that out. It's going to be great. Go try DCC out, get an experience with that, and hopefully find some pirates in the future.
I believe if it's still active, there is a link in our panels for the DCC core book.
I think it's still there.
I
believe it is still there. So if you're interested in that, it's down there in the panels. You can click on that. It'll take you right to Amazon where you can pick it up. There's Protista. So
hey, good seeing a fellow gong farmer over there.
Oh, gong farmer, right?
Yeah. So definitely pick up that book, give it a shot. I mean, it's a pretty good time. It's a different experience if all you're used to is 5e or Pathfinder or something like that. It's a very different mentality. It gets you out of the rut. I think it gets you into just trying a few different things out, like you said. It was good times.
And I always tell people not to be afraid to play any game you come across, because you might find something that you absolutely love way more than whatever it is you're playing right now. And when I listed off the games I played, I went to Gen Con and one day played 6 different game systems. I'm not the go play D&D, D&D, D&D. I go play all the stuff I can't find people to play with locally.
Exactly right.
Michael and I played a really cool Limitless Adventures, I think they are, down in Illinois. Have a really cool World War II comic book like rulebook that uses 5e and still has fantasy features in it. You're like a tank crew in the desert. It's awesome. Never would have known that it existed, except that we were just looking through the catalog for Gen Con, like, oh, that sounds crazy. Let's do that. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, take a chance. It's always good advice.
Not every game is awesome, but you have a potential to have a fantastic time with almost every game. And if you don't like parts of the game, twist it to fit your party and your story and things like that, as long as it doesn't break the game. I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And if you find out you don't like a system, you understand what it is you like about the system you like. So it gives you a lot of information really quickly, which is great. Like
that Kids Warriors RPG that I run, where it's just you have skill numbers and it's just opposed checks, and there's no way to overcome some things sometimes. So if I put it into Fate, then you get that little bit of randomness in it, and then it makes it more engaging.
Absolutely. And if you get the opportunity later on and you do finish up the stuff for kids, you should definitely put that out for us. I know there's a lot of people in our chat that have been talking about trying to bring children into gaming, that I'm sure they would be super interested in that product line as well if it became one.
Yeah, I've thought about that. The character sheets themselves, I would have to just make new character sheets from scratch because it uses a lot of the original character sheet.
Sure.
But like the creation process and the adventure that I wrote, it's in our to-do list to get it packaged up, probably for some low cost, because I'm not making a living off of it, but it sure did help for the last 16 weeks when I was unemployed to have some kids D&D outline coming in. And I really want to get it out there, but the character sheets will have to be totally reworked. Luckily, I know an artist that makes wonderful character sheets.
That's great. Well, we'll look forward to that.
Little does he know, I just made more work for him.
We're running out of time here, so we got to get our plugs in now. So, Dustin, you want to hit them up tonight since I did it yesterday?
Sure. I've got them.
There's a lot.
All right. So Monday nights, 10 p.m. here on the Wisdom Check. You find me, Jeff, and a guest. And next week, we have Daniel Wagner, who is somewhat credited as being one of the first third-party publishers for Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to have him on here next week. We'll be talking about some of those very, very early publications that he has done with Dungeons & Dragons. So it'll be super cool to get to hear about some of that old school gaming again next week. Tuesday nights, 8 p.m., our man Cam, he does Bardic Knowledge, where he composes game music for our TTRPG shows here live on stream. You can watch him here 8 p.m. Central Time for Bardic Knowledge. I'm not positive does he have a guest on with him this week? Jeff, do you know?
I do, because it's going to be me.
Is it you? Yeah. I was wondering if it was you. So
that's me. So we're going to be chit-chatting about music and putting something together, and we'll see how it flows. I'm pumped because this time I can actually hear the music while we're talking to each other instead of having to listen to the echo from his headset.
The only thing I know for certain is I will never be on that show because I'm not musical.
Hey, that's something. You should go on there just so there's a person who isn't.
I have a
music
deaf
guy.
ear when it comes to that stuff.
I'm the bard in my Avernus game right now. I have 2 epic things that I wrote, and one of them is about how Roll20 screwed us over in a fight.
Nice. Very good.
So Wednesday nights, Jeff has been running a Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Mm-hmm.
We were running a module Fall of Plaguestone. That has come to an end. Jeff is working on some homebrew stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this Wednesday, they're taking a night off, though. Jeff is still working on getting the homebrew stuff ready. So there won't be a Pathfinder show this Wednesday, but hopefully we'll return the following Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thursday nights is a video game night, 10 p.m. Central Time again on Thursday. We're playing 7 Days to Die. Alpha 19 is out. We have to reset our server. Dusty's Inferno goes away. I got to start rebuilding it from scratch again, so I'm going to be doing a lot of mining. I don't know what these guys are going to do. Mining might not even be a thing anymore. I don't even know how it works now. They're changed everything in the game. So you'll have to tune in Thursday, see all the new features and all the weird stuff and the new graphics that they have downloaded for 7
Looks
Days
good.
to Die. It's going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Unless you're watching Levi's screen, it'll look just the same.
The same potato computer. That's true.
Because this week is a holiday, our Everstorm 5e game, our homebrew adventure, where there will now be back down to only one Bowrin, will be this Friday instead of Saturday. So Friday night, 10 p.m., we get back here again. So we have a busy week this week.
Sure do. Yeah.
That brings us to Friday night, where we'll have Everstorm with us. We're not here Saturday for the 4th of July. Go spend time with your families. Watch some of our other friendly streamers who do their stuff here as well. And we will then catch you again following Monday. Then we'll be back for Wisdom Check.
Mm-hmm.
There's
a couple shows on there
every other Sunday, so
Mm-hmm.
it won't be this coming Sunday. You're still another week out before Horror in Huttenberg episode 2, which I have not yet named, but I'm getting close to the title for episode 2.
We just survived this last week, so I'm looking forward to it.
Just survived. You did fine.
You
Didn't even get touched. But Chuck,
That's true.
What? Did he start something on fire? I bet he started something on
He tried.
fire.
he wanted to, but there was no fire involved in the first episode of Horror in Huttenberg. I don't know if we got there without that's on fire, but
Had no fire rage.
And but there's another show we've also got to mention, and that's DM to Art, which is probably going to be done a couple times this week. I think he said it was going to be Tuesday and Thursday, but to know for sure, Levi does an art show. He's an art teacher, and he is making art for our characters, for our games, and now he's taken on some commissions, so he's working on that. And we never know when he's going to stream because he's Captain Chaos, so you have to be in the Discord to find out when he's going to do it. He usually posts it the day before or the day of, so keep posted there and you can find it. Also, make sure you check out our YouTube for past episodes of things. We're on Spotify, iTunes, everywhere you find podcasts. So go check that out. And the only other thing we got is also on Sundays. There's the artist David Lee Pancake, and he is running his Twitch stuff. So I think he switched it to 4 p.m. Eastern time. And he goes and he's making our characters. So he's sculpting them, which is pretty kick-ass. Yeah.
pretty cool.
And so he's got a Patreon there. Go support that. Go check out his YouTube. He's streaming multiple times a week now, whether it's on Facebook or on Twitch. So you'll see a lot of different things. The whole process of sculpting, mold making, painting, everything. So it's very cool to check it out. But I think that gets us through our plugs. There's like a mountain of them every week.
Seems like there's always more and more every week.
Mm-hmm. And while Dustin is looking for a raid for us here, I want to say thank you very much for joining us tonight, Christopher. And thank you, chat, for joining us as well. It was a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time.
We are going to raid.